Hey, folks, we're right at 2 o'clock now. I'm going to give it one more minute for folks to venture on in, and we'll see what our participant list comes up to at that point. Give it a chance to grow a little bit. I apologize. Hey, so I'm Terry McGraw. I'm the head of customer success here at Polarity, and I'd like to talk a little bit about Polarity and its use cases within the security operations centers. Um, a little bit about my background. Prior to coming to work at Polarity, I had spent almost 6 years as the global cyber threat analysis lead for Dell SecureWorks and running all of their SOCs globally. And before that, I did 27 years in the Army, the last 10 of which were running cyber operations and counterintelligence operations for agencies like the Army Cyber Command and one of the intelligence agencies. I've spent a lot of my career building and leading SOCs, and the security operations centers have some endemic challenges to them. If you've been doing this a while, you know that the security operations centers um, are usually where people cut their teeth in the security field, which is it's just a little strange, and it's a bit of a juxtaposition because it's also where you first detect, triage, and contain the threats to your organization or the organizations to which you're responsible for, and it's also where the first place that people come right out of school or as they're transitioning or moving on from other jobs and starting a career. And so they tend to start in the security operations center. I'm not, I know why that is, but it does create some unique challenges for the security operations center. You need folks to be skilled in the art of triage and containment, but they may not necessarily have the practical experience that you would want given that job. And then as folks occupy the security operations center and then they get their skills and they grow, they're looking for new opportunities. And so the lifespan of a security operations specialist, at the tier 1 and tier 2, can often be quite short. We're talking 24 months, which leads to a little bit of turmoil, turbulence in your personnel. So you're constantly having to sort of look for the next recruit or next recruits, depending on the size of your organization. You're having to look to where to take those more skilled folks and place them or grow them. How do you recruit them? How do you train new people? How do you maintain them? How do you retain them? All become quite challenging for the folks that have to lead and manage security operations centers. And so getting the workflows correctly, getting the ability to train them consistently. Consistency is a huge problem for most security operations centers that have more than a few headcount, because someone's always on that maturity journey. They're coming into the organization, they've been there a while, and so it's interesting because you'll get some dynamics on both sides of that equation that you have to address as a security operations leader. So, for example, a newer security analyst may not necessarily know all of the the in-depth understanding about how to do the triage and event analysis, and they rely a lot on just googling things or asking their teammates questions or going to their leadership as they learn and grow. And on the opposite end, someone does this time and time again, day in and day out for 8 to 10 hours on a shift. as they think they get better, or as they do get better, complacency can step in. They'll go by gut reaction, and they may not go through all of the steps required to make a completely full and thorough investigation over time. That's just human nature on both sides of that spectrum. And what you really want is to drive them, to that sweet spot of, they're working very efficiently, yet they're very effective in the quality and consistency of the work, and the work across the team, is also consistent. And so those are, some of the headaches that go along with building and leading the security operations center. So you have added to that the architecture that you're bringing to bear, right? So the security analyst is not responsible for what an architect or a CISO or a CIO picked to be the architecture, how many ever iterations ago. They're inheriting the architecture that's providing the telemetry. And that telemetry can be varied, but it also means that you've got a lot of disparate systems, right? There's always some state of new, equipment, new software, some level of integration that either has or has not happened, or is, in the aspirational to do bucket for later, that may never sort of come to fruition. And so the life of the security analyst in that first part of their journey is one of, I need to be able to understand the nuances of what I'm looking at, what the telemetry is providing me. I've got multiple systems I have to navigate to make an informed, authoritative decision. So I have my SIM, I'll have my CMDB, I've got my ticket management, I've got my direct messaging solution to my teammates, I have a knowledge management system somewhere, I have a dozen or so external data sources that I'll need to go to validate things to which I don't know. As a consequence, the life of an analyst is spent clicking, searching, trying to find enough data to make an intelligent decision. All the while, time is ticking away. So, if you're an MSSP security analyst, you're working against an SLA or an SLO with your respective customers. If you're in the SOC that has an organic capability, again, you still have your own internal metrics that say, I need this to be contained and escalated with X amount of time. And so it's really a pressure cooker for the folks that end up occupying the security operations center. And we've created an environment, not deliberately, of course, but that makes them have to deal with lots of disparate systems, lots of disconnected data, and lots of searching to make informed decisions. And so that's sort of where Polarity was really born, was out of that acknowledgement that those situations exist. And whether you're buying an orchestration tool, or you're building out your SIM to be integrated, it's always in some level of maturity. And there's always something being ripped out and put in, and there's always the data normalization that has to take place, and the correlation that has to take place, and even the best of us, it's scripting and workflow improvement. For every one of those changes means that your build has to change, and then you need to go back and rewrite scripts and rewrite codes and redo integrations of orchestration tools. Some may or may not be very user friendly in their construct. And so you're in this constant state of having to integrate that, to pull all this data together, to make an informed decision. And so that's really the space that Polarity occupies. And I gave that big long introduction because it literally set up the power of Polarity and how it can be applied in that security operations use centers. So I'm going to cover today 2 use cases that will kind of highlight the power of Polarity in the security operations environment and the security operations center specifically. 2 very popular use cases. One that's event triage, and then one will be a phishing triage, and we'll cover those more in depth. And you can always get a copy of this or replay this at the hyperlinks in the slides, and feel free to reach out to us anytime at polarity.io. So let's talk about triage before we jump right into the demo. What is it that a security analyst is responsible for? And those that you have done this a while, know what I say is true. First, you have to say that you've got a lot of telemetry. You've got network telemetry, you've got endpoint telemetry, you've got net flow, you have external communications, internal communications, email. There's a tremendous amount of telemetry that has to be sifted through when making an informed decision. And the thing you have to decide, is this a true or false positive? I hate to break it to y'all, but telemetry these days is really, really noisy. A lot of appliances have sacrificed fidelity for casting a really wide net. Better safe than sorry. So you catch a really wide net, and that tends to produce a lot of noise. SIMs are the same way. I always like to say that the answers are only important if you ask the right questions. And SIMs may not ask the right questions, and nor may the telemetry, and so you get a lot of signal to noise, meaning I've got a lot of stuff I got to sift through to find out what actually happened. And so after I've determined if it's a true or false positive, if it is a true positive, do I care? Meaning, has it been blocked by another piece of my architecture? Did one piece of telemetry tell me something bad happened, but it was mitigated by another security control or another appliance? And then, so if I do care, meaning it wasn't contained or it wasn't effectively nullified, how much do I care? And this is an important nuance, right? Because not every piece of your architecture has the same business impact. And for example, is the ransomware on the CEO's laptop, or did it affect someone on the guest wireless network in the lunchroom? How you react to that and how you go about containing it and the urgency by which you contain it all depend very, very much on that key point of what did it affect in my environment, how extensive is that in my environment, and do I understand the business context of the piece of architecture that was affected in a breach. And so then if I care, and I care a lot, meaning I have now a sense of urgency, I've got to go do something about this. Do I know what to do to contain it? And do I know how to escalate? Do I know to whom to escalate? Do I know when to escalate? And then how do I go about engaging the IR team for mediation, or do I do that within the same organizational construct I have? Interestingly enough, as we've seen, as organizations have matured and they get larger, you tend to get this bifurcation between security folks and IT operations. They're funded. One is funded, as a capability expense. One is an operating expense. So you've got your hardware purchasing and the people supporting that fall into one financial bucket, which drives a wedge between the folks that are trying to secure that environment, and then your IT, your security analysis folks actually become customers of your IT ops and vice versa. And that means that tickets have to be generated and information has to be transitioned, and from one group of people to another, you have a timeliness gap for containment and remediation. And so enter orchestration tools. Orchestration tools are great, but they have to be configured. They have to be brought within the engineering. Things have to be tied together. Systems have to be open and able to be interacted with the orchestration tool. But then you come right back down to the original problem, which is, do I have enough business context to let this orchestration tool actually automate a response action? And in our experience and our customers that we've talked to, and in my own experience with servicing several thousand customers, not very many are willing to let orchestration tools just completely automate a response. And we'll go into a little bit of why that's so here in a minute. And so at the end, I'll also take questions from the community writ large. But let me just jump sort of into my demo, if you don't mind, and we'll sort of cover what I'm talking about. So first, I have a mock-up data here of an event that has been brokered to an analyst. Now, Polarity works at the pixel level using optical character recognition on the fly. So we look at the pixels on the screen, we do some predictive analysis to determine what it is on the screen, and then we'll do smart lookups based on the data that's presented to the analyst. Most solutions are trying to look at the data themselves and do a data-centric lookup. We're just capturing what's in view of the person doing the work and returning information to that analyst in their workflow. So it's really kind of an inverted paradigm that kind of solves the problem of how do I integrate all the data. We don't worry about that. We bring the data to the person trying to make the decision. And so as it does, so why I say that is it doesn't matter if this is a notepad, if this is a PDF, if this is your SIM. This could be XOR, it could be Splunk, it could be your Phantom, it could be your CMDB, your ticketing system. It does not matter because again, it's looking at the text on your screen. So I'll do. Let's assume for a second that I have been brokered this event to Triage. So again, I have to determine my 5 things. Is it a true or false positive? If it's true, do I care? If I care, how much do I care? And then what do I go do about it? So I'll just turn Polarity into its highlight mode where we'll get the augmented reality kicking in, and we'll start to see that Polarity will start to highlight information immediately on the screen about what we have available. And so Polarity works by just sort of rolling over your mouse onto the information presented. So let's start tackling the information about what we need here. So the first thing I have to understand is it a true or false positive? Well, so we see that, captured from this piece of telemetry, oh, by the way, the telemetry involved here is Carbon Black Defense, as I'll highlight here. We'll see that the Carbon Black was an endpoint telemetry, and it produced some hash values, right? So I scroll over to see what actually happened. Right away, Polarity automatically took that hash value, went out to the authoritative data sources that I have connected, and brought back real-time information on it without even deep diving into Polarity. And Polarity does have the capability to deep dive, which I'll show you. But right here, I already know that through a couple different sources of information, external data sources, I see that this is ransomware. It's in the Ryuk family. It has a very high confidence of being malicious, and it's been associated with the TrickBot downloader, and oh, by the way, associated with the threat group Cobalt Strike. I don't even have to dig down into there, and I've already conducted about half my triage. I now know that this is a true positive, and I'm starting to care. Right. So if I wanted to deep dive in to see what it said about this particular hash, I look at the authoritative sources that Alien Vault has said on it. I can read the summary values of what it says about this particular malware and where it's been seen. If there's any annotations on that, that a previous analyst has made, I can see that through our channels. So in real time, someone has already made the comment that this is in fact a RIAC hash. So I'm already doing the initial triage of do I care? Okay, and so, well, how did this get on my box? So I see that we have this, string here provided by Carbon Black that shows the telemetry. So I'm just going to do a quick lookup in Polarity, and hey, guess what? I know that also contains a URL, but if I dig down into we have a CyberChef integration, so you can deobfuscate your payload. I'll get to that in a second. But I can go through and see that I have information about that particular user string as well, or excuse me, a process string. So what else do we need to know about this to determine? So I know it's a true positive. I understand sort of where the telemetry came from. But now the most critical point of this question becomes, do I care and how much do I care? Well, so again, I've used this in multiple examples. I scroll over the 2 affected hosts, and immediately I can see right here that it's been annotated as a critical server in my environment. And that critical server is running, it's in the Georgia data center. I know that it's running Polarity. Of course, Polarity would be critical, and I know the MAC value. So essentially, right there, if all I was presented was the IP or the host name, I now know that I both have in this particular case, the CentOS server. All the telemetry told me is it was running on a server running CentOS. It didn't provide me any business context at all. But now with Polarity, I have immediately the business context. I know its geolocation. I know what process it's running. I know where it's located, which will help immensely when I go to do my containment and remediation actions. In this particular case, the other host involved is listed as the CEO's laptop. The CEO is located in Florida, and the host name of that is Flyway Machine. So now I know that I have a ransomware infection delivered through a PowerShell script that's running a pretty nasty form of ransomware in the form of Ryuk. So let's talk about what it's beaconing out to. So we can scroll over here to the external IP address that it's looking for command and control for, and we immediately see that it's geolocated in Moscow, Russia. So its IP address resolves to a location in Russia, and it's been associated with lots of other malicious activity. And if you wanted to deep down to see what those particular associations are, any other domains that are associated with it, any other IPs that are associated with it, are all located right in the overlay window. So as a security analyst, I don't have to go out to any other form of telemetry, or no, I don't have to open up a browser. I don't have to pivot into another system. I've literally got the external data sources coming directly to me to do my initial triage. Okay, so let's say I wanted to examine the payload. It's been obfuscated using base64 encoding. I can just again activate Polarity and pull up my CyberChef integration. And if I want to run my CyberChef, I can just translate it from base64, and lo and behold, my output is this is a fake encoded string, not obviously for demo purposes. So you can start to see the power of Polarity from what it does for authoritative data sources, what it can provide in consistency of data. Polarity can also be used if, let's assume that this was a bulk download. You can highlight the entire thing, look up every character within the clipboarded area, and derive all the needed external and internal data sources to make an informed decision if I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So think about that. I don't have to then pivot. I don't need to worry about my data lookups. But if I'm a security leader, and this is my responsibility to ensure that I have consistency of analysis amongst my team, you have the ability to pick the data sources that you believe are the most authoritative, whether that be internal to your organization, whether they be your favorite, external OSINT or operational security intelligence data feed, your favorite threat intelligence feed, all presented in a consistent format. So every time an analyst was presented with a particular hash or a particular asset, the exact same consistent authoritative data sources will be used by every analyst, because the system is taking it out of the discretion of the analyst. The data is being provided. Now, the analyst always has the ability to do a deep dive. Here's the other cool thing. If you've ever really done this in real life, taking threat intelligence out of a threat intelligence platform, and trying to apply it during event triage is almost a non-starter. Being able to figure out what part of the IOCs there may be threat intelligence about, what TTPs may be related to. In the beauty of this example, right away, you see that I have Alien Vault providing me executive summaries of the threat groups involved, providing me real-time threat intelligence about the user groups, other telemetry that I might be able to look for, other IOCs that I might be able to look for, and is provided right there at the time of analysis. I don't have to stop, try to go research, pull all those threads together, copy and paste the data, look for additional IOCs. All that telemetry, all that data is provided to me to make an informed decision. So now I've decided that I've got a nasty ransomware. I know what it's affected in my environment. I know the business context around it because I know what those endpoints are providing to my architecture and to my business. I've looked at the payload. I see that it's beaconing out to an external IP. Now what do I do about it? So remember, I talked about that orchestration tool. Well, Polarity gives the ability to run your playbook right here. So I've literally encapsulated everything I need to do with the event triage. I understand its maliciousness. I understand the business context around it. I understand the threat intelligence and IOCs around it. All of that is brought to me as an analyst within my workflow. Never had to break my workflow. Never had to open up another web browser or another tool. And now I can even run a playbook to contain that. Now, again, this is an example, but you have the ability to run the playbook right here. If I wanted to tap into my knowledge databases store, so for example, in Confluence, I have data around these RIAC hashes, and I can click on and it'll take me right to the Confluence page to where that exists. I don't have to, if you've ever tried to search for a knowledge management database on the fly, i.e. Confluence or SharePoint, or even in Jira, for example, finding relevant data when and where you need it while you're in the middle of a triage is hugely problematic. Let's say that you had your escalation procedures contained in that, or you had your ticketing system had a historical context around those associated host name. All of that can be provided right here at the time of analysis. You don't need to pivot out. So let's talk about pivot a little bit more into let me drag it over here to the screen if I can. Let's see here. Bear with me one moment while my screen won't cooperate with let's see here. Sorry about this. The best plans of mice and men sometimes go awry. I am not able to drag and drop my monitor here. Crud. Let me see if I can do this. I might have to just pivot to maybe we can cut this out in the subsequent. All right. Well, let's go to plan B because I'm having a heck of a time opening Jira at the moment. I'm gonna pivot to an example of a phishing, and I apologize for that 3-minute digression here. I couldn't get my own monitor to relinquish control of my Jira page, so I'm just going to pivot into a Word document, which actually might be kind of helpful to prove my point that Polarity works on anything that you can present text on, whether that be Jira, a web browser. Let me exit out of that real quick. So what we have here is a brokered phishing example. So I now I'll reload my page to reduce the telemetry. Again, the process for doing phishing triage very similar to my event triage. We have to determine sort of what happened, where it came from, who was it intended, and what was the operational impact of the phishing. And so in this particular example, I have a phishing email that we're going to have to triage. So let's just, for example, let's say who sent it, right? So we can do a quick search for where this originated from. And immediately, oddly enough, MaxMind has this registered out of Germany, but the IP has been seen in Moscow, Russia. So either you have a spoofed IP, or it's a Tor node, or you have an entity in Germany with a Russian IP space. So you could just sort of do that quick triage. Either way, we know it's external to the United States, and you can make a quick determination of, does that IP have any business associated with my organization? However, that's just looking at the who is data of the IP address. Right now, my external data sources from my threat intelligence platform tell me that we have overwhelming evidence that this has been associated with scanning and probing activity. So blanket spamming of the internet, and it's been listed several times as an abused IP. So right away, we know that the source destination IP already has a history of malicious intent. So what do we know about what was affected? We can also just click in and do a quick research on what it is that it affected in our environment and pull it up in Polarity. In this particular case, let me turn it to highlight mode so I can show you what I'm also looking at. If there's no data associated with the IP, it hasn't been seen before, I could go into and look at the hash values associated with what the telemetry picked up. So I now can see the payloads involved in that particular email, whether that came in a macro, whether this was embedded in the actual context of the email, or whether this was what resolved to. We now can see the malicious binary that was also involved in the spear phishing attempt. Interestingly enough, as we see that this particular IP address that it was sent to, I now know that it belongs to the chief strategy officer. I know that the device is located in Connecticut, so I now have an idea of the impact and who it's targeting. Hey, and lo and behold, it's also been involved in another security incident that's been annotated in my service now. So I have historical tickets about this particular IP address affecting other entities within my environment. So I've immediately established that the IP address in question that was the origination, the malicious hashes that were associated what it is. I know what it affected, so I have asset context and functionality. And I know that we have associated alternative, or excuse me, additional information about this affecting other users in my environment. All of that triage done right out of the Polarity window without ever having to pivot into another tool. I don't need to open up any external reputational databases for IP, host name, or user group. I literally can just scroll over my phishing triage. And remember, this is probably brokered from your sandbox or some other, or submitted by a user. And so the analyst doing the triage is going to have to conduct the same types of event triage. What do I know? What's it affected? Who's it affected? What's the business context around it? Do I know with the historical value of any other users that may have been affected by this particular IP or spam email in question? And I can determine all of that on the fly with Polarity and Polarity's augmented reality, drawing my attention to the relevant portions of that phishing. Again, I don't have to do anything but literally open it up and start to conduct inspection. And then I can determine how best to do it. Do I recall this? Do I have now to associate it with additional tickets? Do I need to go ahead and suspend that user account? Do I need to contain the host? Do I need to isolate or pull the device offline or suspend credentials? And all of those decisions can now be made fully informed with the use of Polarity. So all of that said, I'm going to summarize here and let you ask me some questions if there are any. Polarity can also help with the normalization of training amongst your team. We have a feature in Polarity called channels. Channels are the logical storing of information made by your individual analysts. So, for example, the what we know about this particular IP address, we have asset data, but we also see that it was presented in the channels and added by someone. So, for example, I pull down this IP address. I see that a note was made, an annotation was made about this. It was added to my channel about demo assets, and I can see that another analyst has made a comment. In this particular case, we know that Joe Revell is a repeat offender, meaning he's either really prone to getting spear phishing attacks because of his position, or he just might need some remediated training on how to deal with phishing in his environment. That said, I now have analysts the ability for them to make additional comments. If I had the analyst make a comment where they didn't agree with the conclusion, this could have been a false positive, I can get in and say, no, I don't believe it's a false positive. This is a real event, is a real problem. And now, anytime, I apologize, my Splunk is giving me a problem. So if I make the comment, anytime anyone ever sees that IP address associated with this particular incident ticket, I now get the asset awareness from the Polarity channel, but I also get the ability of my team to collaborate across the team in real time associated with things that they see and that they've done. Great use case for this is false positives. For example, a misconfigured device in your environment. Let's just say you had a device beaconing out, port 137 net BIOS traffic, right? It's being blocked at your firewall, but the firewall is kicking off a lot of alerts saying you've got unintended traffic trying to exit your environment. Probably not something you want to break your neck over, but you have an analyst that's triaged it. They've made a ticket. Well, guess what? Your Splunk or your firewall is still beaking out every time that traffic is hitting, and you're getting a ticket after a ticket after a ticket, based on time and associated. So now you've got a lot of stuff your team is then brokered and has to triage. All one person has to do is take a singular note about, hey, I've investigated this, it's false positive, here's a ticket associated with it. Now, everyone who sees that host name or IP in their environment will see that note made in Polarity and get that additional context. So it has the way to augment the power of your analyst across team, but not flood it in a chatty way like a DM or a Slack channel does. A Slack is not discriminate. You add your comments and you have to scroll through them, and some may be relevant, maybe not. Polarity will only bring you back relevant information from your teammates when it's something that you're looking at on your screen. Channels can be used to contain escalation notes. They can be used to contain false positives. They can be, you can open up a new investigation, current investigations. You can put asset data information in there, user data information. Polarity can be tied to your Active Directory streams, your ticketing systems. It can be pulled from your asset data stores. All of that dynamic content that you would normally have to go try to figure out how to, put all of that into a single data repository, all that into a single ingest point. How do I get all of that and enrich that data to make a fully informed data decision? All of that is obviated when you have Polarity's overlay window pulled up. I can continue to work my workflow no matter what that is presented in. Have all of that enrichment and awareness and team awareness as I'm conducting my duty day, to help provide consistency across your team, provide upskilling as senior members can help junior members and vice versa. Escalation notes can be provided in real time. Any contextual knowledge management can be provided in real time. All of that has the capacity of Polarity inside the overlay window and native to the software itself. Let me pull back up our slide deck here, wherever I put it. Nope, that's not it. Oh, well, we're going to fake it as if we have it pulled up. I'm going to pivot into a question and answer session. Brenna or Maury, I know you're monitoring. Do we have any questions in the Q&A? I don't see any.
I don't see any yet, but participants, you can always open the Q&A box or the chat box at the bottom if you have a question or comment.
Let me reduce my email here. Question and answer period. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes, see if anybody has a question as to how this would work in your environment. Just an administrative note, we have a community edition. If you'd like to play with Polarity, if you'd like to use it in your home environment or test environment in your office, and you want to just see what it can do for your team and your workflow, our community edition is fully available on our website. It's free. I think it allows you 4 or 5 integrations for external data sources that you can pull into your environment, and just see how this works in your environment, and how much pain it will ease for your team. We don't often talk about sort of the misery factor when you spend your life clicking and searching before you ever get to exercise your skills. Just try to find data to make an informed decision, because God forbid the security analyst makes a bad decision. That can become a multi-million-dollar mistake. And that's a huge burden to place on someone very early on in their security career, and the leadership all involved in training them. Wouldn't it be cool if you could provide consistent, full awareness of both your internal business context and the external, TTPs and IOCs associated with any malicious content you see, and that can be immediately triaged in near real time as they're working in whatever workflow they have. They don't have to open up additional web browsers, additional tools. All of that telemetry and tools can be brought right in the Polarity window. So please, I encourage you to try the community edition, play with it, experiment around with it, and I'm sure you'll come to the same conclusion that I did when I first saw Polarity, which is this can be an absolutely upskilling, absolute force multiplier, an ability to scale much, much greater across your team with the limited amount of folks you have. They'll be able to work more effectively, more efficiently, and more collaboratively than they ever have before. And so that's my SOC use cases. I'd love to talk to you more about how you operate in your SOC, what's unique about your SOC, what your KPIs are, any use cases. We have plenty of data from our customers that we can show. We have plenty of use cases. We have a running series for the SOC use cases on our website. Please go check it out. We offer community tech training about not only our tool natively, but how we integrate with other tools and how that can be, augmented power across your environment. Without further ado and no questions, I will go ahead and adjourn. Brenna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, everyone. This was recorded. You can find it on our website later next week. Thanks, everyone.